this one here, that's old. Can I take it off?
I'll take it.
Don't get confused.
Okay.
I was getting confused over there. The name of your reading is not the tree song. It's trees, the trees. And the name of my offering is not colors of the wind. She screwed it up. It's okay. It's okay.
We'll just make it.
Just so you know,
Yeah,
all right?
no, I
You
know.
get into what that? And they're looking at me to play, and I'm like,
Yeah, she didn't.
no, she can get it right. Well, trees, she mixed up the trees. It's okay. I wish colors of the wind wasn't so well known.
Well, I'll just say that we're making the change. No, no, no. It makes sense
All
to
right.
say something.
Okay.
Check 1, 2. Check, check. It's wonderful to have technology that allows us to live stream a sermon, or service, but there's something about the minister walking up the aisle and seeing just how much hair he doesn't have anymore from the back of the room that sets a tone for worship. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester as we settle into a spirit of worship this morning, beginning with our prelude video of our music director, Matthew Johnson, playing Quiet Streets by Ola Jello. This is also an opportunity for you to light a silent candle of joy or sorrow if you desire. Some mornings it takes 2 or 3 sparks, but eventually the light shines. These are the words of my colleague Jennifer McLaughlin. As the first hint of green begins to peek through the barren ground, as that little sprig grows into a healthy stem, as that stem grows into a stalk and forms a bud, as the bud slowly opens with each new day to form a yellow daffodil, let us be like the first hint of green, renewed by the warmth of the sun's rays, and ready to emerge with a new energy, ready to face the day. We light our chalice this morning to bring a glimmer of that warmth into our space. Beloved, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester. I am Reverend Aaron Payson. I am honored to be one of the ministers of this congregation, and we're glad that you joined us here this morning. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes on the forming edge of your own life, to gather in community so that we might care for each other, take a moment to reflect on our own well-being and discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment and service in the wider world. To begin, we acknowledge that in Worcester, Massachusetts, we work, live, and learn and worship on the seized ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc people who survive and remain active as the Nipmuc Nation. Large print orders of service and hymnals are located in the foyer, as well as hearing devices and pew cushions. For those who would find these helpful, please see one of our ushers or greeters to help locating any of these. At this time, we are passing around our pew forms. This is an opportunity for you to share any information that you would like for us to note, changes of address, phone numbers, email addresses. If you're new, please do join in signing the pew sheet. The information is used for church purposes only so that we might connect with you more directly. For those joining us online this morning, for safety purposes and so that we might come to know you better, as you're able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that this service is being live streamed on Zoom and Facebook, as well as being recorded for future availability on our church YouTube channel and our website worship archive. We extend a very special welcome this morning to newcomers and invite you to fill out one of the cards found in the pews. You're welcome to drop that card in an offering plate or leave it in one of the boxes here in the sanctuary or the fellowship hall. For those of you that are online, our online hospitality team will share the link to where those pew cards might be filled out digitally as well. Due to the pandemic, we are foregoing the collection of children's change for change in person at this time. However, there is a basket next to the Joys and Sorrows Candle Bowl for those who would like to contribute change to assist the Church Emergency Fund this morning. Following the service this morning, you're invited to join us for a time of fellowship here in the sanctuary. And for those of you that are online, we'll invite you to share with each other in breakout rooms if you desire. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. Our opening words this day are by David Ensley. At this time of balance, at this time of awakening, we celebrate Ostara, the spring equinox. We honor the fertile earth. We honor the warming breezes. Yes, I said warming breezes, very warm breezes. You know, the ones you've been wishing for since that last winter snowstorm. We honor the waxing light. We honor the nurturing rains. We welcome spring, new life to bring to land, to us, to all. May the powers of the Ancient One, the Spirit of life, the source of all creation, may the powers of the goddess, bright lady of the moon, and of God, horned hunter of the sun, may the powers of the guardian spirits, rulers of the elemental realms, may the powers of the stars above the earth and below bless this time and this place and all who gather here. Would you please join in our opening hymn found in your teal hymnal this morning, number 1010, We Give Thanks. Precious day, for the othered here and the far away, for the time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here like many of you, I have this almost daily quandary about where do my texts actually go. So on Friday, when I texted the office administrator and said, order of service looks fine, there's one change. We're going to change the title of the offertory to the tree song. And so I assumed that that had happened. I did not look at the order of service again, which I take responsibility for. However, there is a small change we need to make in the order of service this morning, which is the title of the reading is Thanks Be for These by my colleague and friend Richard Gilbert, and the title of the offertory is the tree song. Like I have always said, the order of service is just a suggestion, not necessarily an order. For the slants of sunlight through windows, through the shimmering shadows of snow, for the whisper of wind on my face, for the smooth skin of an apple, for the caress of a collar on my neck, for the prickling of my skin when I am deeply moved, for the pounding of my heart when I run, for the peace of soul at day's end, for familiar voices in family rites, for the faces of friends in laughter and tears, for the tender human arms that hold me, for the flashes of memory that linger, for the mysterious moments that beckon, for the particularity of this instant, for the silence of moonlit nights, for the sound of rain on my roof, the wind in dry leaves, the waves caressing the shore, for the softness of summer breezes, for the crispness of autumn air, for the dark shadows of white snow, for the resurrection of spring, for the faithful turning of the seasons, for the angular leafless trees, for the gentle hills rolling in the distance, for the meandering streams seeking an unseen sea, for the cornstalks at stiff attention, and the brittle plants bristling past their prime, for the unharvested gardens returning plants to enrich the soil, for the sight of familiar faces, the sound of our spoken names, the welcoming embrace of outstretched arms, for the ritual of friendship, reminding us we matter. We matter. Thanks be for these. Would you like to hear some good news? Yes. Here's the Stewardship Committee to give it to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Roberts, and together with David and Maura, we're leading the Stewardship Drive this year. This is a really important time for our church, of course, because this is the opportunity for each of us who care so much about this place to make a financial promise to the church to help us set our budget, cover operating expenses for this wonderful community that we all hold dear. As you see these gardens showing up on the wall here, Dave's being our Vanna White, each garden pot that you see represents $10,000 towards our goal of $225,000. So you can do the math and see that we're about a third of the way there. So congratulations to us. So our finish line, by the time we triple this, will be probably over by this quilt by the time that we're done. But we really do want to hear from you. We'll be in the back lounge after the service if you'd like to just talk to us personally. Hopefully you've received the emails that we've been sending out, and if you haven't seen anything, then there might be a spam filter thing going on, so you can let us know or dig around your spam folder. We're trying to not mail out as much paper this year. So we are counting on the email working, so let us know if it doesn't seem to be working. All right, so thank you again for the pledges already that are over $72,000, a third of the way towards our goal. And today's offering will now be received. Thank you so much.
We come to that time in our service when we're given pause to consider what is deepest in our hearts or most profoundly on our minds, or in the work of our hands in the days that have transpired, or in the prospect of days to come, joys and sorrows that touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a co-journeyer. So I invite those of you who have joys or sorrows this morning to form lines on either side of the sanctuary to come and speak briefly into the microphone, telling us first who you are, so that those using our auditory enhancement devices and those joining us online might also participate in this important ritual. And then to light a candle of joy or sorrow if you desire. If you'd like me to read your joy or sorrow, bring it up here with one of the cards that's in the pew, and I'll do that for you, or you can raise your hand and I'll come get it from you, make certain that it's read. For those of you that are online this morning on Zoom and Facebook, if you put your joy or sorrow in the chat, we will make certain that we also share those publicly as well.
Good morning. My name is Linda, and this is a joy. I'm not sure if any of you are aware that there is a Facebook group called Mutual Aid Worcester, any of you who belong to it, but it's a page where if you need help with anything within the city, you can just post your issue and hopefully you'll get some response. Someone this morning posted that she's looking for a church that is very involved in the community, and I wrote back saying that this church here, we have a food pantry, we do the shoebox project, we do the crop walk, we do a Thanksgiving food drive, and much, much, much more. And hopefully, this will help our family expand somewhat. And I told her to come check it out.
Great.
I'm Rachel Wagner, filling in as the choir director while Matt is continuing on. Thank you. I'm feeling super grateful for this choir who has agreed to take a step into being a fledgling bell choir. It takes a lot of courage to take up an instrument that you are familiar with or you haven't used, haven't done in a long time. And I am reminded of not only how beautiful bells are, but how beautiful and perfect imperfection is, and how important it is to have a place where it's okay for you not to be perfect. And this is a place where we can be authentic and not perfect and beautiful. So thank you.
I'm Dave Showalter, and I have a combination joy, sorrow, and public service announcement. So
I'm sorry, only one of those at a time, please. No,
all wrapped into one. So I think she's going to be absolutely fine, but we had a very difficult week with our beloved COVID dog, Rosie, who on Tuesday went after a porcupine and had to be sedated with all those pulled out. And then on Thursday, we had house guests and left some cinnamon raisin bagels out on the counter, and she went counter surfing and ate about two raisin bagels, had her stomach pumped and with 24 raisins that were discovered. And raisins are extremely toxic to dogs. So this is something that people may not realize, but if you just give a dog a bunch of raisins or give dogs a bunch of raisins, half of them will die of kidney failure. So she had, after having the stomach pump, then she spent 2 nights in the hospital getting her kidneys flushed. And so far, all her kidney function numbers look good. I have to take her back one more time today just to absolutely confirm. But we're just, at first I was just annoyed at all the expense and everything. And then when she was spending 2 nights in the hospital, my heart really started to hurt. She's really a beloved member of the family now. So really glad to have her home, and many thanks to Laura and her kind that have cared so well for her this week. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Wallace, and I have it's definitely a joy with maybe just a little bit of a concern mixed in with it. So I had to put this in a little bit of context. My older brother, his name is Andrew, has been living in Japan since since a little bit before COVID struck. Basically, he actually I say it's the year before COVID struck. He left to go to live over in Japan. He's like a teacher assistant for Japanese elementary and middle school kids, helping them to learn English. I actually just found out because he posted it on Facebook and told me also a little bit beforehand where he had been living. Japan is a little weird when it comes to how it's set up and stuff. They have instead of here in the United States how we have like all our states and stuff, Japan has what are called prefectures, which are basically the equivalent to the states over here. So he had been living in the prefecture called Gifu for a couple of years now, and he was basically just going to different schools around the area, helping with teaching middle school and elementary Japanese students English. He recently found out that he is actually going to be leaving Gifu to go to another city, which is south of it. And if I can pronounce it right, it is called Toyohashi, if I remember correctly. And he said that it's a little bit of a promotion from what he was doing because now he's technically administratively called a teacher there, but as he told me, the whole process was because of, and we've all dealt with this before, administrative red tape is the best way to put it. So he's looking forward to it, but at the same time, he said he was very, very frustrated with what happened because of it. He'll be very much missing the kids that he was teaching before in Gifu, but he's definitely looking forward to it. It's just that the whole process of going through it was just a bit of a frustration for him. So just keep him in your thoughts as he makes this new journey.
Good morning, Mary Ostara to everyone. I can give you a list of toxicities for cats and dogs. The next up is Easter lilies. Let's keep away from them. I just want to say thank you to everyone that continues to check in on me and support me. Tom, we got to talk. As I turned 47 yesterday and take on the new role as guardian of this little one. My back is the only thing that's not really appreciating it. And then just some continued health and support to my daughter's mental health, as she's now unemployed, seeking employment, while she doesn't really think she currently needs any medication. So if you can think of Miss Rain and my back. Thank you.
Hi again, Catherine Roberts. I had a really tough time with COVID, as did all of us. Winter is always my worst time of year. And on Friday, I was able to hop on my bike and go out for 10 miles, and it was so wonderful. So I'm really happy today to be talking about spring and emerging from the darkness and appreciating the green. It really means the world to me. And one thing that's really exciting too is that the church is ready to start resuming having food and fellowship starting on April 3rd. So I'm going to be really counting on everybody's help. I've taken on responsibility for sort of making sure that happens. And so if you're willing to help out, I would really be grateful. And I'm very excited to start seeing that happening on April 3rd. So thanks.
Hi, I'm Bruce Lachey. Joy and concern, with my parents. So my dad celebrated his 92nd birthday on St. Patty's Day, March 17th. That was nice. He has dementia, but he's still enjoying life, at least in the moment. He doesn't really remember what happened before, but he does enjoy things as they happen, so that was nice. My mom, who's 89, has been on dialysis for the last 10 months, and she's undergone a whole series of vascular surgeries to make a place in her arm where they can do the dialysis easier. And on Tuesday, I think, the new tube in her arm blocked, and they couldn't do dialysis, and she had to go to the vascular surgeon on an emergency basis, and they cleaned it all out, and hopefully it'll be good from now on. But it's a tough road for her, living with my dad and caring for him. She has help caring for him, but still, and then dealing with her own medical issues. So keep her in your thoughts. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got I've got the Zoom ones here. Do we have any Facebook?
The only thing we have on Facebook is someone saying good to hear from you.
And the update on Matt is that his surgery has been rescheduled for April 13th. So we will continue to update you as we know more. And as you all know, that is more of an approximation than a destination with the medical system right now. So we will continue to keep Matt in our love and our embrace and our prayers. David Macheski writes this morning, thinking of Mike McGinnis and his 20-year-old son, Paul. His son, Paul, died recently. This was very much in the newspaper, and lots of people locally have been sending condolences to Mike. Let's see here. Mara Pentlarge writes, the surgery went well. My leg is straight again. I would love to have visitors. Just call and we can set it up. So there is another as well. Let us be in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, source of our inner and outermost being, grant us this day peace, the peace of a warm spring breeze, the peace of budding leaf and flower, the peace of life renewing itself. Let us be mindful of all of the trials and tribulations that are put in perspective when we pause for a moment and recognize our relationship to that life that is within, between, and beyond us. For those in search of health and wholeness, for our four-footed friends and our two-footed friends, for our leafy friends, for all of those who come before us and who remind us in voice and song and bell sound that this is a glorious moment to pause and remember ourselves and each other deep into the heart of the life that we share. For all of this, all that has been said and all that is said in silence, we give great and abiding thanks this day. Amen. And blessed be.
I call my own, where I can stand by the sea and look beyond the things I've known and dream that I might be free. Like the bird above the trees, gliding gently on the breeze. I wish that all my life I'd be without a care and flying free. But life is not a distant sky without a cloud, without rain. And I can never hope that I can travel on without pain. Time goes swiftly on its way. All too soon we've lost today. I cannot wait for skies of blue or dreams so long that life is through. So life is song that I must sing, a gift of love I must share. And when I see the joy it brings, my spirit soar through the air. has taught me how to fly. For now I know what I can be, and now my heart is flying free.
Give thanks this morning for both of the Banus. David, that has to be one of my favorite songs of all time. Partly because it was a song that is connected so deeply with Ferry Beach. For those of you who don't know what Ferry Beach is, it is a camp and conference center on the coast of Maine where we go with our family and friends from First Unitarian Church, Worcester, for a weekend in the fall so that we can have a last gasp of summer on the beach and on the volleyball court and in the rocking chairs and the dining halls and sunset over Saco Bay. Like others in the congregation, the Sweetsers in particular, I spent the better part of my youth at Ferry Beach and served there one summer as the one of the lifeguards on the beach, which I said I would do as long as no one went in the water, because it was on average about 58 degrees. But if you're in for more than 5 minutes, you don't feel it anymore. You don't feel anything anymore, but you don't feel the cold. And yesterday, one of the Facebook groups that I belong to, which is old Ferry Beach, when I say old, my age, Ferry Beach crew folks, and one of the pictures that was posted was of 3 very young ladies in a picture, and some dude with hair that was split down the middle like this turned sideways with a big bow tie in a dinner jacket. And I'm like writing going, I recognize that bow tie. It was me when I was all of, 16, 17 years old. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it was not that long ago, right? But those, those moments come for me in precious few times when, right when I need it the most, I am given this kind of elemental reminder that life has had its rich moments. Last Sunday, my son, who was home from spring break, did not, in fact, attend church. Neither did I when I was in college, by the way, so I'm not surprised. But when I looked at the newspaper the next morning, and my wife said, "There's your son," and it was a picture of Latrams filled to the brim with people, and this kid standing 4 foot above everyone else with his back to the camera, I had this sense that someday he too will have this opportunity, this moment to remember that it wasn't that long ago. And I think that it's actually this experience of remembering ourselves back into our own lives, especially in times of tremendous transition, which is really a spiritual art form. And I want to talk about that spiritual art form this morning as a dynamic of what it means to be hope-filled or hopeful. But I want to begin this morning and return to James Ashbrook, the pastoral psychologist and therapist that I introduced you to last week, who tells the story of a colleague who arrived in a Persian village on a camel train, loaded down with his luggage, and he called to a porter standing on the platform to come and assist him. He said, "Here's my luggage, now take it to my house." A little demanding, if you ask me. The porter, being very, very responsible, inquires as to where exactly the traveler lives so that he can take his luggage to the proper destination. And upon hearing the porter's request, the traveler steps back and snarls, "I suspected you were a ruffian and a robber, and I now know that you are. I'll be damned if I'm going to tell you where I live. Now take my luggage there at once." Oh, you laugh. But I wonder how many of us have actually had that kind of experience, especially coming out of COVID, where we are kind of in desperate need of each other's attention and companionship and so forth, and yet in many ways we've forgotten how to be in each other's physical presence, right? That sense that what's necessary for us to do this thing that we have craved for 2 years is actually a little bit harder than we might have anticipated. Ashbrook notes that this story is a story that he once told to a client. He must be my kind of therapist, right? Once told to a client who had insisted that he should work with him because his need was so great, and yet his interpersonal maneuvers were skillfully avoidant of genuine contact. I use this story as an illustration of the kind of tension that can arise in relationships following a period of crisis. So in many ways this morning, it is a continuing meditation on what I began last week in earnest. This morning, however, as we continue to contemplate our own stories and our own experiences moving into a different phase of pandemic response in the world that continues to harbor both hostilities and hopes, it is the hopes that I want us to consider in the midst of our glorious incompleteness, or as was so aptly put this morning, our integrity. I don't know about you, but the kind of exchange that Ashbrook describes is a tale have abounded for me of late. Conversations with people come with deep needs that often get derailed because we've not been accustomed to the level of relational intimacy and conversational nuance that's required to fulfill our desire to be known more deeply and to relate more fully when we've lived with the suspicion. And here's the issue: when we've lived with the suspicion that the other is dangerous. And this works its way out not only interpersonally, like, do I really want to take my mask off and stand up here and preach in front of a bunch of people that are going, he's just way too freaking close. Right? Never had that kind of sensitivity before, but it's true, right? So we have this different kind of awareness that we bring. And it spills out into community in a variety of ways, too. I think about all of the effort that went into arguing with the city for years that we needed to have day centers for homeless folk, that having a night place for them from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. was great in the winter months, but we had no designation for them during the day, and the library turned out to be the most accessible place when they wouldn't allow people to be at Union Station. And there was a lot of argumentation from the state on down that we weren't going to do any more day centers and things like that we were going to do housing first. Which those of us who were on the ground were saying, well, that's great, but you still have people that need a place to go and need to find help, and wouldn't it be great if we had a place for them to be together? Nope, not doing that. Must have gone on for 5-6 years, and then a pandemic hit, and all of a sudden the homeless became dangerous because they became a potential vector to infect the rest of us. And lo and behold, people came out of the woodwork to talk about the importance of a day center. Because, you know, it's really important that we take care of the homeless. But the awareness of that did not come from the plight of the homeless, it came from the fear of the homeless. And I want you to think about that as a dynamic of progress, but an illustration of wrong reasoning. Right? In a lecture that I heard earlier this week as part of this Deconstructing Jesus series, Tripp Fuller talked about you can get the label right and the content wrong. Right? I think that's one of these experiences. You can talk about wanting day centers for all of the wrong reasons. But that's where we're at, and I think that's an interesting illustration, not only because of the way it spills out into community, but I think there are probably many ways in which we could identify those moments in our own existence, our own lives, where we have all the good intentions, but the reasoning behind it is actually to protect ourselves, which is what Ashbrook's tale is actually about. So I ask, what does it take this morning to meet the challenge of both our desires and our experience of late? Let me begin by suggesting that experiences of loss and experiences of death, the death of so many in our community and world, as well as the experience of war and climate change and systemic racism and so many other things, have once again highlighted a life-death kind of dichotomy that we have been caught in and that have been kind of amplified by our media. And yet, as we honor and celebrate the return of spring, we're reminded that life and death are not dichotomous, but interrelated in a cycle of birth and growth and decay and death and rebirth. Life and death are not opposite ends of the poles of our existence. They're integral to the cycle of life itself. I would suggest to you this morning that the opposite of life is not death, but hopelessness. The opposite of life is not death, it's hopelessness. A state of being defined as having no sense of meaning, purpose, or a sense of future. To be clear, like the transitions that take place through life we can experience as grief or little deaths, there are commensurate moments of hopelessness that are transient. When we strive to grasp the meaning amidst feelings of despair, the task that is required to move through such transient moments of hopelessness is to remember ourselves into the life we're called into, which is a function of how it is that we perceive our connections to the world and to each other. As we move back into different environments for work and community, how many of us can relate to another story? This one told by Anthony DeMello in his book, 1 Minute Wisdom. He writes, I am in need of help. I will go, or I'll go crazy. And I want to say that word crazy is in the text and not something I would prefer to use because I think it is inappropriate. We're living in a single room. My wife, my children, my in-laws, our nerves are on the edge. We all yell and scream at each other. The room is hell. Anyone had that experience over the last couple of years? Yes, perhaps? Mueller replies, do you promise to do whatever I tell you? I swear I shall do anything. Very well, how many animals do you have? He says, I have a cow, a goat, and 6 chickens. And the master says, take them all into the room with you and then come and see me after a week. The disciple was appalled, but he promised to obey, and he took the animals in, and a week later he came back, a pitiable figure, moaning, I am a nervous wreck, the dirt, the stench, the noise, we are all on the verge of madness. Go back, said the master, and put the animals out. Notice he said put the animals out, not the wife and the children, the other things. I understand that there may be a tension there between who goes and who stays, but I'll stay with the story. So he ran all the way home and came back the following day, his eyes sparkling with joy. How sweet life is. The animals are out. The house is a paradise, so quiet and clean and roomy. So what's fascinating about this for me is that it's not simply a time of challenge to remember our best selves, as the first tale would have us remember. It's also time when we begin to remember the last few years differently, right? The pathway to hope begins with welcoming the challenge of the present moment in order for us to integrate our pandemic experiences differently. So those of you who have spent the last couple of years in that room with your family, the question is, as you move back out into the world, how does that experience of the world impact your memory of what the last 2 years have been like? In the story you just heard, it's clear that adding new experiences to your life and so forth, and then deciding what you are and aren't going to do, otherwise known in our culture right now as the big quit, are actually ways of us to reintegrate our memories of what we have been through into our existence. We come back to ourselves with a different sense of what the past has been and what meaning it carries for us. The first task in all of this, and by the way, there are 3 tasks. I keep wondering why Unitarians still think in trinities. But by the end of the sermon, there are actually going to be 6 tasks broken into 2. It's still 2 trinities, but I'm here to say they might cancel each other out, which would be a unity, and that's a very Unitarian thing. Okay? But the first task is to re-enter with awareness, to be conscious of the fact that you are re-entering. And that is what these stories kind of illustrate. It's a level of consciousness that we need to regain for ourselves about what we have been through and what we're headed into. The second task is related to gaining a sense of hopefulness, and that is the presence of grace, right? Grace with ourselves and with each other, which is illustrated by another story by de Mello in a second book of his called The Song of the Bird. And this one is about the Arab aspirant. And this is Jalad Rumi telling the story. One day, Muhammad was offering a morning prayer at the mosque, and among the crowd of people praying with the prophet was an Arab aspirant. Muhammad began to read the Quran and recite the verse which Pharaoh makes the claim, I am your true God. On hearing this, the good aspirant was filled with so much spontaneous anger that he broke the silence and shouted, the boastful SOB. The prophet said nothing, but after prayer was over, the others began to scold the man. Are you not ashamed of yourself? Your prayer is surely displeasing to God, because not only did you interrupt the holy silence of prayer, but you used filthy language in the presence of God's prophet. The poor Arab trembled in fear until Gabriel, the angel, appeared to the prophet and said, God sends greetings to you and wishes you to get these people to stop scolding that simple Arab. Indeed, his spontaneous profanity moved my heart more than any of the holy prayers of others. Now, if you think that this is an argument that profanity ought to be openly included in all that we do and who we are, that's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about, however, that how many times in the past month have you encountered your own glorious incompleteness, where your reaction to a particular situation overwhelmed your capacity in the moment to actually direct that action? How many of us have been in arguments where, a few minutes later, an hour later, or a day later, we come back and say, that really was not me. When it was, but was not who I wanted to be in that moment, and I'm sorry. I wonder if, in terms of a second task, we might consider that the story of the Arab aspirant is that the behavior we loathe in ourselves and in others might be the most authentic entry point into the heart of intimacy, where instead of reacting to the appearance of impropriety, we might greet such moments with curiosity. Well, ain't that interesting? Where did that come from? Where are you right now? I probably have told this story before, but I have a friend of mine who used to be a hospital chaplain and lead a hospital chaplaincy program in West Virginia. And he told me the story of one day the CEO of the hospital sent out this email announcing some change, and it just triggered him and sparked him. And he wrote back this flaming email and hit the send button. We've been taught over the years that if you write the flaming email, that's fine. Put it in the draft folder, read it 24 to 48 hours later, and probably at that point you were going to delete it anyway. But no, he hit the send button. 10 minutes later, he saw that an email had returned to his inbox from the CEO, and he prepared himself to be called to account for his behavior and potentially be fired. He opened the email, and to his surprise, it was a very short email. Feel better now? Period? Question mark? It's that level of understanding that I'm talking about. It's the ability for each of us to transcend the moment that sparks us into a rancorous kind of discourse about what's going on, and to ratchet it down by remembering we are human beings who can get triggered, and maybe we ought to be more curious about what's happening to each other than whether or not one of us or both of us are right or wrong. And I say that to you in this moment because I think that that's exactly the kind of space that we're in community right now, where we're going to start seeing implosions here and there as we move farther and farther away from the actual critical moments of the pandemic and less BA2 or whatever the hell it's called decides to rear its ugly head. But that we have an awareness of the fact that that lack of temporal proximity to the events means that we often take out the emotional content that's related to those events in the environments around us without understanding its origin. So we need grace. We need the ability to be able to take a breath and then enter into the experience. This is one of the most profound lessons in ministry to me. And that is, when people are most critical of you, step closer to them. Because criticism 9 times out of 10 is a cry for intimacy, not a call for change. And we so often hear those critical comments as ways of helping to distance us from each other. But if you can learn to go closer to the person who's screaming, you did something wrong, and say to them, tell me more about this. Not why I'm right and you're wrong, or, well, you misunderstood what I was saying, or you really didn't understand what my actions are. No. Walk up to them and ask them, tell me more about what you have experienced and why it's important to you. How many of you remember the story I've told from here about in my last church about the phrase pissed off? Any of you remember that story? So I preached a sermon in which I used the phrase pissed off. It's actually one of the more minor phrases that I've used in the sermon. So it kind of surprised me when I got a letter from one of the people in the congregation who was berating me for using such language in a sermon. But here's the deal. Pissed off is a 2-word phrase. She sent me a 4-page, double-sided, single-spaced letter. And so I'm looking at the letter, and I'm looking at the phrase, and I'm going, pissed off. 8 pages. So I started reading the letter, and the letter began to tell this. If you read between the lines and you read what she said, she kept repeating over and over again, if you were my son. And I went, oh, that's interesting. So I called her up and I said, I got your letter. And she's like, okay. And I said, let's talk. I want to learn more about what happened to you with this. And she was like, great, come to lunch. They lived out in the hills and hollers of West Virginia. So I went out one afternoon and she and her husband were there. And I walked into the house and sat at the table and she served this scrumptious lunch. Which you knew was not an entree into an argument then, right? I mean, and I said to her, tell me about your son. Not, let's talk about the phrase pissed off. Tell me, you say in this letter, you mentioned your son. I don't know anything about your son. I'm curious. Tell me about out came this incredible story about how the son and the father had been up on the farm and they were cutting down a tree and the father was not listening to the son and the son was saying it's going to fall badly, and in fact it did. It fell on the son and broke his leg, and now the father and the son weren't speaking to each other and they were completely isolating from each other, and how heartbroken she was that this was happening. And obviously the son was pissed off, right? And how often do we get in those situations where we get stuck on the words or we get stuck on what we think is being communicated because it's triggered us, and we don't spend enough time contemplating, where is this coming from? And I love this person. I care about them. Why would I get into more of an argument about this silly little phrase? Because it ain't about the phrase. It's about the story. It's about being remembered. The final task today is that with a deepening appreciation for the lessons that we have emerged from our time of isolation and the gift of grace that we give ourselves and each other, we begin to build trust in ourselves and in those around us and in the world we serve. I'm mindful here, I went back to some work by a renowned Reformed theologian named Jürgen Moltmann. And I want to end with this because I think it puts what we've been talking about in perspective. Human life, he writes, is not only a gift of life, but also a task of being human. Life is not just a gift, it's a task, he writes. To accept this task of humanity in times of terror requires the strength and courage to live. Life must be affirmed against terror and threat. To put this in simple terms, life must be lived, and then the beloved life, which is the common life in the human and in the natural world, will be stronger than the threat of universal annihilation. How very powerfully important in this moment that we remember that. That life must be lived, and then the beloved life, which is the common life in the human and the natural world, will be stronger than the threat of annihilation. We'll take up more of this as we move through Lent toward Easter. Enough for today. Amen, and blessed be. Let us join together in our closing hymn, number 63, Spring Has Unwrapped the Flowers. In our gray hymnals. Please rise in body and spirit. Spring has now unwrapped the flowers, days fast climbing, life in all her growing powers, toward the light is striving, golden iron touch of old, winter's time and frost time, seedlings working through the mold, now make up for lost time. Herb and plant that winter long slumbered at their leisure, now be thriving green and strong, finding growth and pleasure. All the world with beauty fills, old and green enhancing, flowers make glee among the hills, set the meadows dancing. Our benediction this morning are the words of Andrew Pakula. May you know fully and deeply the blessings of each of your heart's seasons, the inward turning of winter, springtime's lush renewal, the effortless steady growth of summer, and autumn's rich harvest. May your passage from season to season be blessed, eased by hands to hold, and by the light of love to guide you on. Amen, and blessed be. Once again, beloved, worship in this space has come to an end, but our service continues, next with an opportunity for conversation here in the sanctuary. I hope that we will see you again very soon. Next Sunday is one of our favorite services of the year, our annual Youth Group Sunday. Our youth group will be here in person to share with you their thoughts about what they've been through and what they're going through as teenagers, because all of us have forgotten that. I understand completely. No, they have been hard at work, and there will be dance and song and reflection and all manner of things. So I hope you'll join us next Sunday at 10 a.m. And until then, may you be safe, well, and whole. By the way, for those of you who are looking for a copies of the directory, you can see one of the folks in the foyer who have a handful of copies that have been printed out in case you need one.